we start, I just want to briefly explain what a karaoke reading group is, at least what it is from my perspective. So the idea is quite simple. First, you pick a text, a text that you like, preferably, just as you would pick a song in a normal karaoke. And we recommend that you pick a text that is not too long. So try to be below 500 words or under 3 minutes or so. You can say a few words about the text, but this is not required. And after your performance, we will open up the floor to discuss the text. Either you say something about the text at the beginning, you introduce it, or at the end. So to try to like engage people and create some debates. Second, you have to submit your entry in advance. You must contact the DJ at United C and say your text choice. We ask you to do so in order to prepare a lineup and the visual for the night. Here is our current lineup for tonight. So we only have an hour and a half. So depending on how long it takes. Sorry, Mary. So the text by Mary is not bullshit job, is from Utopia of rules. Sorry about that. But depending on how much time we have, we may be able to accommodate more people, but that's not really that much. So Mark, you'll be starting, if that's okay with you. So to all readers, I recommend you to read from your own text, as my visual might be a little bit distracting. So again, if someone wants to say something, say a quote or something, please get in touch with me on the chat. Send me a private message, and if we can accommodate you, we'll try to do to queue you up. Is that okay? Do you have any questions? Okay, so Mark, I'll try first. I'll try to share my screen quickly. Up, perfect. So you're gonna have a prompt or something. Is that okay? Is it can everyone see the my screen? Yes. Okay. So Mark, it's whenever whenever you want. You can start whenever.
Okay, merci. So this is from the Utopia of Rules. And I'll just start reading. Creativity and desire, what we often reduce in political economy terms to production and consumption, are essentially vehicles of the imagination. Structures of inequality and domination, structural violence, if you will, tend to skew the imagination. Structural violence might create situations where laborers are relegated to mind-numbing, boring, mechanical jobs, and only a small elite is allowed to indulge in imaginative labor, leading to the feeling on the part of the workers that they are alienated from their own labor, that their very deeds belong to someone else. It might also create social situations where kings, politicians, celebrities, or CEOs prance about, oblivious to almost everything around them, while their wives, servants, staff, and handlers spend all their time engaged in the imaginative work of maintaining them in their fantasies. Most situations of inequality, I suspect, combine elements of both. The subjective experience of living inside such lopsided structures of imagination, the warping and shattering of imagination that results, is what we are referring to when we talk about alienation. The tradition of political economy within which Marx was writing tends to see work in modern societies as divided between two spheres: wage labor, for which the paradigm is always factories, and domestic labor, housework, childcare, relegated mainly to women. The first is seen primarily as a matter of creating and maintaining physical objects. The second is probably best seen as a matter of creating and maintaining people and social relations. The distinction is obviously a bit of a caricature. There has never been a society, not even Engels' Manchester or Victor Hugo's Paris, where most men were factory workers and most women worked exclusively as housewives. Still, this frames how we think about such issues today. It also points to the root of Marx's problem. In the sphere of industry, it is generally those on top that relegate to themselves the more imaginative tasks, i.e., they design the products and organize production. Whereas when inequalities emerge in the sphere of social production, it is those on the bottom who end up expected to do the major imaginative work, notably the bulk of what I've called the labor of interpretation that keeps life running. There's a footnote to this I'm adding. No doubt all this makes it easier to see the two as fundamentally different sorts of activity, making it hard for us to recognize interpretive labor, for example, or most of what we usually think of as women's work as labor at all. To my mind, it would probably be better to recognize it as the primary form of labor. Insofar as a clear distinction can be made here, it's the care, energy, and labor directed at human beings that should be considered fundamental.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to Mark, electronical round of applause, of course. I
like the confetti.
Is there any comment, Mark? Do you want to say something about the
Yeah,
quote you selected?
It's so good.
No,
so
just
good.
I would just add that imminent imagination that he's speaking of was sort of touched on.
Can you hear?
By David Wedengraw just recently in their new book coming out, when they talk about the 3 freedoms. And I think those are tools that we can use to sort of better the lopsidedness of those imaginations.
Yes, thank you so much. Any comments about Mark's text? I mean, that would, I'm sure that speaks to many of us in the Museum of Care, because it's really talking about the two ultimate values that we are defending here, which are care and freedom, as opposed to production and consumption. Well, if we don't have any comments about the text, I think we're going to move on. And the second extract is going to be read by Simona, and it's a quote from Against Economics, which is if I'm correct, is an article published in a magazine. Is that right?
Yes, it's a commentary on Robert Skidelsky's history of modern money, if I'm not mistaken. And David took from this book many very interesting ideas about John Locke and how the need to defend at any cost the rentiers was the origins of of an economical disaster and of the idea that money should be defended at any cost, and also of our modern time austerity. But I took the last lines from this essay because they look like a political program and a theoretical program too. And this is what's interesting for me in this text. Shall I read from the karaoke or from my text?
I would recommend to read it from your text. I do have the correct quote, so just read and I'll do the visual. All right. Okay. So whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready, but I have a terrible Italian accent. So, economic theory, as it exists, increasingly resembles a shed full of broken tools. This is not to say there are no useful insights here, but fundamentally, the existing discipline is designed to solve another century's problems. The problem of how to determine the optimal distribution of work and resources to create high levels of economic growth is simply not the same problem we are now facing. It asks how to deal with increasing technological productivity, decreasing real demand for labor, and the effective management of care work without also destroying the earth. This demands a different science. The micro-foundations of current economics are precisely what is standing in the way of this. Any new viable science will either have to draw on the accumulated knowledge of feminism, behavioral economics, psychology, and even anthropology to come up with theories based on how people actually behave, or once again embrace the notion of emergent levels of complexity, or most likely both. Intellectually, this won't be easy. Politically, it will be even more difficult. Breaking through neoclassical economics lock on major institutions and its near theological hold over the media, not to mention all the subtle ways it has come to define our conceptions of human motivation and the horizon of human possibility, is a daunting prospect. Presumably, some kind of shock would be required. What might it take? Another 2008 style collapse, some radical political shift in a major world government, a global youth rebellion? However it will come about, books like this, and quite possibly this book, will play a crucial part.
Thank you. Let's give a round of clapping to Simona. Simona, do you want to say something about the text, why you chose it, why it touched you, or shall I take some questions or comments?
Oh, well, I already said. I think this is a political program, or at least outlines what we are facing, and the lack of imagination we are facing also. I think David's fight against common sense and the common ideas that something is valuable in as much as it can be sold, and what's his strive to establish what is a real value, like in the prior text chosen by Mark, was part of this program. And yes, it's quite an issue of imagination and of breaking the theological building and the moral theological building of neoliberalism and of capitalism. And the importance of debunking most common economical ideas is cannot be under evaluated. That's my comment, but I would very well, comments by you would be very welcome.
Any comments from the audience? I actually appreciate one thing about this karaoke is that I had never read this text, so I actually it's a good thing about it is that you can actually discover texts that you haven't read before.
Yeah, I would just say, sorry. Is it okay now? Yeah. Okay. So I would just say that this was a very important text for David. He was carrying this book of Skidelsky that probably was like, I don't know, 3 kilograms everywhere. Now, like traveling for a long time, and this essay took a lot of his energy. And Simona correctly said it's a kind of political program. Yeah, so I think he was, whatever he was saying was quite obvious. And now more and more people understand that. I think in our last Fight Club, according to the comments, that Michael Hudson is won so easily, and so absolutely, it's just one of the proof that this text really was good.
Thank you, Nika. I'm going to put the debate in the chat, or maybe Nika, can you do it? The Fight Club debate. That would be nice for those who didn't have a chance to listen to it. There was a debate between Michael Hudson and Thomas Piketty that took place last month.
Okay. Should I post the link to the Fight Club? Okay, I will.
Any other comments from you guys? Okay, thank you. So
I always got the business to with each part who came to the table. I always got the feeling it is so amazing to be a part of this thoughts, and to how much the world is defined through that, what we are able to think, or to what we see is what we are able to there is so many out there to to discover and or to face or to get a perspective on it, and the words are producing and the thoughts are producing this perspective, and I wonder how much is this spread what we are doing or what you started to do with the karaoke, with all the Museum of Care. It's so wonderful, and how could this be very in a vast way be spread? You know what I would like to say. So you're really lonesome most of the time with the part of the world you have in mind, and then there is this karaoke and beautiful written thoughts are creating the world which is possible, but it is not out there. It's not to share easily with other people, and I wonder how and the gathering like this is giving a feeling of being having a perspective together for a while, and so I felt all the time this has two, as this is wonderful in this way to share it, and the other way how to what will be the way to transform the world, to get this sentence into the world, to make them visible. Yeah, that's
Robert. I don't know. Jury's out. Nika, do you want to say something about that? But thank you so much, Robert, for the kind words. And we have still a lot of work to do, I suppose.
Oh, I'm not sure. Like the Museum of Care want to spread its care around the world and take over everything. I think we're just experimenting with tools and putting out a new one. And I think this one designed by Vasily is really amazing. I actually think it's some kind of combination of techno clubs that I visited in Russia and in Berlin, and some bizarre reading groups for the religious people that I have been joined in the US in some strange trips, you know, when they read in Bible together. So this is something very, very cool. I don't know what come out of that, but I think it's an amazing experiment. And we have been having lots of reading groups. Very often people don't read, and then we just and that was just very practical idea. Okay, let's read together and then discuss something that we actually read together. Yeah, and thank you, Vasily, for this amazing design. I think design is very important. I was noticing pictures that you choosing for like user picks for the reading groups for Museum of Care for over the year, and I was always amazed how wonderful and strange they are. And so yeah, everything is just so great. And thank you so much. Had a hard day today actually. I just got to David Sanchez in Venice. So it was like a really horrible day, but yeah, it's cheerful to be here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Nika. Yeah. Is Max ready to be to read his? Max, are you here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Max.
Hello. Yeah, no, thank you for letting me partake today. I'm not a very strong reader, so bear with me. But yeah, glad to be here. So I'm reading something on social currencies and human economies, which I think David wrote back in 2012. So yeah, I'm just gonna give it a go. What distinguishes human economies is merely that they recognize that the chief business of any social system, or indeed any system of the production and distribution of material goods, is the creation and mutual fashioning of human beings. Indeed, one could well argue that it is only the emergence of commercial currencies that made it possible to imagine an economy in the sense we are used to using it in today at all. That is an autonomous domain of human activity primarily concerned with creating and allocating material possessions, and not primarily about the creation of people and social relations, let alone to see how people behave within that domain as a model of human aims and aspirations more generally. Historically, the endless repetition of the myth of barter has played a key role in making it possible to imagine that such an autonomous sphere of activity exists, and of course, of creating the institutional arrangements that could make it possible. I skip a few chapters, talking about the Tiv. Tiv then were haunted by the visions of an insidious secret organization that lured unsuspecting victims into debt traps, whereby they themselves became the enforcers of debts to be paid with the bodies of their children, and ultimately themselves. One reason was that it was literally happening to the people who lived no more than a few hundred miles away. Nor is it, to use the phrase flesh debt, especially inappropriate. Slave traders might not have been reducing their victims to meat, but they were certainly reducing them to nothing more than bodies. What was remarkable, that all this was done, the bodies extracted through the very mechanisms of the human economy, premised on the principle that human lives are the ultimate values, to which nothing could possibly compare. Instead, all the same institutions, fees for initiation, means of calculating guilt and compensation, social currencies, debt pawnships were turned into their opposite. The machinery, as it were, thrown into reverse. And as the Tiv also perceived, the very gears and mechanisms designed for the creation of human beings collapsed on itself and became the means for their destruction. As the above example reveals, the change could only be effected by violence. In the case of the Atlantic slave trade, what was almost certainly the greatest and most catastrophic outbreak of commercial violence in the history of the world. Yet at the same time, I think the very intensity of the catastrophe can help lay bare some of the mechanisms by which human economies could have, in many other times and places in human history, overcome the conceptual barrier between social currencies and tokens of a debt that cannot be paid. The commercial currencies as means of cancelling debt in their entirety. One thing is clear, the change was affected by violence. Above all, it was only violence that could have ripped a human being entirely from their unique human relations that they thereby made their unique individuals, a daughter, sister, wife, lover, friend, so as to make her the exact equivalent to anyone else. But of course, this violence was already present, even when the lives could only be equivalent to other lives.
Thank you so much, Max. Can we
yeah, no, I struggled to read publicly, so I hope you, yeah, I didn't stutter too much. Yeah, I found that I don't know, when I first read it, it really brought the humanity of economies to life and how, I don't know, just how cruel the way the economy has become for a very long time. Yeah, I don't know, I found it a really powerful article. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we have a round of applause for Max, and then some comments from the audience, please?
Yeah, I just want to say that I didn't read this for a long time. I first time read it when David sent me the Word file when he just wrote it. And yeah, so thank you very much for choosing this. I remember some other passages from that when he was talking about some
Yeah,
bizarre.
I had to cut lots out. There was so much. I first sent Vasily like 1,000 words, and I needed to. Yeah, it was hard to distract it all because I think the whole piece is so well balanced as a writing. From beginning to end, you're pulled back and forth emotionally and logically. It's a very, very good. I'd recommend if. Yeah, I think you sent me an electronic version of it, so I'd really recommend if anyone hasn't read it to give it a go, because I think it's very powerful. Very human.
I will share the paper, and by the way, everything is going to be available in our library of care at the file under David's name. I'll share the link later on. Okay. So yeah, and that's also the idea. We don't know everything that David wrote, and that's just a good opportunity to discover some stuff.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Max, and welcome again.
Yeah, good to be here.
Next on the line, we have Tom. If we don't have any more comments, I suggest we move on, unless someone wants to say something. Nika, your mic is on. Do you want to add something? Anybody else?
If I may, this text is perfect to show the real immorality of our economics and how it's founded on violence, and this foundation on violence of our whole society in its economic and political structures is something we know in a way, but it's so difficult to detect in its in how it actually works. And this text is so clear in showing it that I really thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Simona. So next on the line is Tom, who is also new, I believe. So warm welcome to Tom. Tom, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Can you hear me okay?
We do.
Excellent.
So it's whenever you're ready. And do you want to say something before?
Well, thank you for this. I really like this format of the karaoke because it's like a book club, but with lots of little short excerpts, which makes it quite engaging. So yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for letting me join you. I've been following the Museum of Care for a year, but it's the first time I've really managed to get involved. So thank you for that. And I'll just get going and maybe say a little bit more at the end. Okay, so reading A Thought Experiment or Blowing Up Walls. What I am proposing, essentially, is that we engage in a kind of thought experiment. What if, as a recent title put it, we have never been modern? What if there never was any fundamental break, and therefore we are not living in a fundamentally different moral, social, or political universe than the Pieroa or Tiv or rural Malagasy? There are a million different ways to define modernity. According to some, it has mainly to do with the science and technology. For others, it's a matter of individualism. Others, capitalism, or bureaucratic rationality or alienation, or an ideal of freedom of one sort or another. However they define it, almost everyone agrees that at somewhere in the 16th or 17th or 18th centuries, a great transformation occurred, that it occurred in Western Europe and its settler colonies, and that because of it, we became modern. And that once we did, we became a fundamentally different sort of creature, than anything that had come before. But what if we kicked away this whole apparatus? What if we blew up the wall? What if we accepted that the people who Columbus or Vasco da Gama discovered on their expeditions were just us, or certainly just as much us as Columbus or Vasco da Gama ever were? I'm not arguing that nothing important has changed over the last 500 years, any more than I'm arguing that cultural differences are unimportant. In one sense, every community, every individual for that matter, lives in their own unique universe. By blowing up walls, I mean most of all, blowing up the arrogant, unreflecting assumptions which tell us we have nothing in common with the 98% of people who ever lived. So we don't really have to think about them. Since after all, if you assume the fundamental break, the only theoretical question you can ask is some variation on what makes us so special. Once we get rid of those assumptions, decide to at least entertain the notion we aren't quite so special as we might like to think, we can also begin to think about what really has changed and what hasn't. And he goes on to include an example there, but I've left that out as it's a bit too long. I thought that was short and powerful enough in itself. So.
Oh, no, I think that was perfect. That was perfect lens. Thank you so much. Can we have some clapping for Tom, please?
Thank you.
Any comment? Any comments? Or Tom, do you want to say something first about the text? It's a text that comes from fragments of an anarchist anthropology, which is one of my favorite books. A really important book, I think.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I myself have got a background in human evolution, and I was always quite struck by how all analysis always, or all discussions always only have a few hundred years of history generally on them. Sometimes you get a couple of thousand years, but everything is always, I suppose, post what people call enlightenment. And it always felt like it takes everything out of context and people are missing a lot of aspects from it. And I also had a discussion the other night with someone, and this idea of modernity, or this idea of development or civilization came up, and trying to define it. And it just reminded me of that piece of text there, just sort of perfectly encapsulates those two things to sort of broaden our ideas and our horizons as to what we actually consider important context for what we're going through now, really. So that's why I like that piece. And it approaches it from a different angle from what I've ever heard it approached from before when I first read it.
Thank you, Tom. Any comments? And this is really something that David Graeber didn't do with his first 5,000 years of history. It's a really good title, by the way. Do you have any more comments? I'm
happy to leave it at that. I think I've said enough.
Okay, thank you. So next performer is Mary, who sent me a quote from Utopia of Rules, but it was very last minute, so I couldn't find the page number. But I'll put that up on the website or on a Google Doc later. Mary, are you here?
I am here. I don't know what I need to do to show up on the screen. I also don't know which page it is because I just took a photo of the page. I don't actually have the book, so.
Okay, no worries. So what you do is that you have your picture, so you can start you can start whenever, and I'll it's probably better that you read from your text,
Okay.
so you don't get distracted by stupid visuals. All right. So you can start whenever you want, and welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, this is of all of everything I've read from David. This is the one, a few paragraphs that really speak to me on a personal level, which is why I chose it. And this is about what happens to people like David or people like me in today's society. So it's about academia. Here's a quote. As marketing overwhelms university life, it generates documents about fostering imagination and creativity that might just as well have been designed to strangle imagination and creativity in the cradle. No major new works of social theory have emerged in the United States in the last 30 years. We have been reduced to the equivalent of medieval scholastics writing endless annotations of French theory from the 70s, despite the guilty awareness that if new incarnations of Gilles Deleuze, Michel Foucault, or Pierre Bourdieu were to appear in academia today, we would deny them tenure. There was a time when academia was society's refuge for the eccentric, brilliant, and impractical. No longer. It is now the domain of professional self-marketers. As a result, in one of the most bizarre fits of social self-destructiveness in history, we seem to have decided we have no place for our eccentric, brilliant, and impractical citizens. Most languish in their mother's basements, at best making the occasional acute intervention on the internet.
Thank you so much, Mary. Round of
Thank you. He then goes on to give an example of the same pattern happening in the harder sciences, not just the social sciences. He actually gives the example of someone from astrophysics, which is what I studied. I did not study social science, I studied astrophysics. And yeah, this is why it speaks to me how so many of us have been essentially pushed aside. There's by this wave of what is the effect of neoliberalism essentially in academia? It's just like you either become a marketer, a self-marketer, or you don't. And if you don't, then they don't want you. I was actually thinking about that the other day because I went to the doctor, and the doctor seemed to be that kind of eccentric type, which I'm fine with. But it made me think that this man would probably, if he had chosen any other path other than a career in the NHS, he would not maybe got very far, because people like him or people like David, the eccentric types, do not have an easy time in today's neoliberal world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary. And it's also a very funny text, which is which David was also very often.
I have a quick question. It's a little incidental to the central argument of the text, but I was actually just listening to this text on an audiobook a few days ago. Why did David, or why would anyone listening specifically think that those thinkers would not get tenure, just out of curiosity? I'm not arguing that that's wrong. I'm just curious.
I'm personally not familiar with them because I think they were all post-structuralist and postmodernist, and I don't agree with anything like that. I come from a completely different background, so I don't really know.
I just saw someone put in the chat that they're too eccentric, so that makes sense in the context and from what I know of reading them. So I wasn't sure if he was disparaging them as not as intellectually sound or if he was endorsing them. So it sounds like he was endorsing them, or at least endorsing the way they went about things, even if he didn't agree with what they said.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I think what David was saying is that they wouldn't be granted tenure not because of the quality of their scholarship, but if they haven't really mastered the marketing that's required of tenure track faculty, that they wouldn't really, that their impact factor, which is what basically gets measured when people go up for tenure, that their impact factor wouldn't be as high as someone who is deliberately thinking about impact factor as marketing. So it isn't really the strength of their ideas as it is the strength of their ability to navigate what has become a marketing system.
Well, if you read the rest of the page, he gives the example of this astrophysicist and who says that today in astrophysics, as I imagine most of the hard sciences, you spend your time writing proposals rather than doing research. And so anyone, by that definition, which is, this is a theory of David that then I think he goes into in Bullshit Jobs, by that measure, anyone coming up with anything new is at a disadvantage, because any new idea is already, it hasn't been tested. You cannot, you cannot put it on a proposal and say, well, I want time on a telescope because of this idea that I just had, because everything has to be self-referential. So I don't think those kind of thinkers would go very far in academia today.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I remember where he was referring to the trouble that people have accessing funding in that sense.
Going back to the impact factor thing, it's also that those three authors almost hardly never wrote any papers. They were writing books, which is something that doesn't add anything to your impact. And also remember Gilles Deleuze saying that he really hated conferences. He'd rather die than going to one of these. And this is something you need to do if you want to marketize yourself as well as an academic today. Anyone else wants to react to that?
I miss David.
I am thinking that David mastered this marketing thing very consciously, and I'm just reading his writings about even at the beginning of Fragments of an Anarchist Anthropology. He says something about how academy works and why there are not so many anarchists in academy. Actually, it was a text I was about to suggest for tonight. And there is something that happens in medical studies that shows a part of this marketing and scholasticism thing, that is people publish wrong stuff. The article about vaccines producing autism was an important example, because this makes your impact factor higher, because of all the people that write about your article saying this is bullshit, this is stupid, it is unscientific. Just to prove you are wrong, they quote you, and so they raise your impact factor. And in many occasions, I saw scientific papers working like this. The one about the ASIA syndrome was another example. And as for scholasticism, when you are evaluate the publish or perish principle, when you are evaluated because you write 15 articles a year, you cannot think if you're writing 15 articles a year. You need to take your time and to think about it. And this is another reason, I think. And also, yes, spending so much time in writing how you will foster creativity and so on.
Thank you, Simona. Mary, I see your mic is on. Do you want to say something before we move on?
No, I honestly, I'm so alien to the world of academia. I don't know how long it takes to write papers, but I know that Jem Bendel wrote Deep Adaptation. He actually had to quit his job and spend a year writing, researching full time for that one paper. And it makes me think, wow, if the expectation is writing 15 a year in order to rise in the ranks of academia, then no wonder everyone is going to just copy paste everyone else's work rather than build something new, because yeah, it's all part of the same game.
Yeah, I wanted to say that in a similar process happened among soccer players. 2 generations lost individual players because of the same kind of discipline, which started to be required very early in their life. So that means they lost quality of movement, of thinking, of understanding, of being self-aware to former times. And that's not only it's a really a whole generation or 2 of them made a change in their in their mindset to understand a game and to fit into the game and to develop themselves inside this game. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. So Nika, you're the last one tonight. Are you ready?
Okay. I just want to ask a favor, if I will fade, because I have a really strange day today. Maybe somebody will want to pick up on me. I will this is my text that I want to read. I will put it in the chat.
So it's from a paper that we've already commented, that we already discussed in this in one of the past reading groups. It's Culture as a Creative Refusal.
Yeah, I'm actually very grateful to Museum of K people that I had this luxury to be with friends reading David's text for this year. That was very difficult for me.
Do we have any volunteers to read the text with Nika tonight? Robert, would you like to read one of the paragraphs?
I'm happy to.
Sorry, who is saying that?
I'm happy to.
Okay, perfect. So whenever you're ready, Nika, maybe you start and Tom can finish. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tom.
Okay. So I will read from the from the text on the screen, yeah? Or from my own text?
It's up to you.
Okay. I will read from the screen. That's real karaoke. What I would like to do in this essay is to talk about cultural comparison as an active force of history. That is, I want to address the degree to which culture are not just conceptions of what the world is like, not just a way of being and acting in the world, but active political projects which often operate by the explicit rejections of the other ones. The idea of cultural comparison is familiar enough. This is, after all, what anthropologists largely do. Most of us acknowledge that even the most careful descriptive ethnography is ultimately the product of an endless stream of explicit or non-so-explicit back and forth comparison between the observer's more familiar social surroundings and those observed. As Marilyn Strachan has pointed out, this is equally true of anthropological theory. It is not just that we honor our own common sense understanding of kinship, exchange, or politics with those that prevail in some particular village or urban neighborhood in Malaysia, Polynesia, or Africa. We also create the imaginary spaces of Malaysia, Polynesia, or Africa themselves by showing how what seems to be commonplace understanding in each areas could be seen as inversions or negative of commonplace understanding in the others. African kinship systems center on descents, Malaysians on alliance, Zenda magic center on objects, Troberian magic on verbal performance. It is from those comparisons that we develop our theories of what kinship or magic could be said to be.
Shall I continue from here?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nika. You can start whenever, Tom.
Such comparisons, however, are rarely, if ever, carried out directly. Kinship, like magic, is neither a Melanesian nor an African term. We have to use our own conceptual language as a medium for conversations between them. This seems to be an unfortunate necessity, considering the way global intellectual life is currently set up. One would really prefer, Strathern notes, to allow Melanesians, Polynesians, and Africans to carry out the conversation directly. But for the time being, the anthropologist is forced instead to play a very difficult three-sided game. Obviously, on a local level, such conversations do happen all the time. No culture exists in isolation. Self-definition is always necessarily a process of comparison. Inevitably, most of this sort of everyday comparison has tended to happen on the local level. The units have tended to be much smaller than Polynesia or Africa, but I think there is reason to believe that it is rarely limited to that, and that large-scale projects of mutual self-definition have played a far more important role in human history than either anthropologists or historians have usually imagined. That is, many of the cultural forms we still, at least tacitly, treat as primordial could equally well be seen in their origins, to a large degree in their maintenance, as self-conscious political projects.
Thank you so much. Oops. Sorry. This is it. That was the last one.
Yes, I have to say that, so when I was 12 years old, I decided to be an artist, like really strongly. And then I did whatever it takes to become an artist, like study and have teachers and do my career and so on. And then when I met David, he started to send me these files of the 5,000 years of that he was writing. It's actually started to make sense to me, because art is a like common project as everything else, as as a way, as a set of tools that we can share, and that could be used to create a society that we want to live in. That's like the way to make the world a place for that, to own it. And yeah, I think that text is very, very well defined at all. Makes sense to me.
Thank you, Nika. And thank you for organizing this and joining us on such a difficult day. Thank you for sharing, really. I know it's difficult to say something after that, but please do not hesitate if you want to say something about the text that Tom and Nika have just read. Please do so. And well, I just need to say something about the next reading group. So because they're probably going to be another karaoke. The theme this night was David Graeber's work, but we might change that, and next time we may have a look at something different. We may choose another theme that we can actually decide with you. So please do not hesitate to suggest a theme. We were thinking doing something about the Dead book, because it's the 10th anniversary of the book, but also maybe something about care, because that's also that's the name of this group. So yeah, please do not hesitate, and please join again. Again, if you want to sign up, if you want to read a text, please sign up in advance. It's much easier for me to prepare it. Nika, do you want to say something to conclude?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone, and to Simona for being with me in this day. It was like a crazy day, but yeah, it was amazing. And that's it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I will be more reflective later on. It just really like a strange day today, so I'm not able to speak.
Okay, thank you, Nika, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'll see you next time, and thank you so much for those who read tonight, and for the to the newcomers as well. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.